Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about how law and economics actually work together?
Oh, it's a fascinating
Well,
connection.
we're going to find out today. We're going to be exploring excerpts from Por qué los abogados deben estudiar economía.pdf,
Which is,
why lawyers should study economics.
Okay.
For those who don't speak Spanish. We'll be looking at the surprising ways economics shows up in legal cases. And we're also going to be looking at why understanding all of this can make you a more informed citizen, even if you're not a lawyer.
Yeah, that's a great point. These two fields, they're so interconnected. Law, it sets the rules of the game, right?
Right.
Economics analyzes how people make decisions when resources are scarce. And together, they really shape how society functions.
So it's not just about money.
No, not at all. It's
Okay.
much broader than that.
Okay.
The source emphasizes that economics helps us understand human behavior, predict consequences of actions, and even, analyze things like criminal activity.
Can you give me a concrete example of how this would play out in a specific area of law?
Sure, let's take contract law as an example.
Okay.
The force points out that if you understand supply and demand,
Okay.
you can actually write fairer contracts.
Okay.
They give a really good example of a commercial lease agreement. Imagine you're a lawyer and you're drafting this lease. You understand how, if there's a high demand for commercial spaces,
Right.
that can drive up the prices. Right.
Right.
So you include a rent adjustment clause in the lease.
So instead of having a fixed rent price the entire time they're renting, you would adjust it based on something like the Consumer Price Index
Exactly.
to track inflation.
Yes, precisely.
Uh-huh.
That way, you're protecting both the landlord and the tenant from these unexpected price swings. You're creating a win-win situation, making sure things are fair and stable for both sides.
That's such a good example. The source also talks about labor law.
Yes.
And there's this economic concept of elasticity. That's discussed. Can you break that down a little bit for me? What does that mean?
Well, elasticity basically measures how sensitive something is to a change in something else.
Okay.
So in labor law, what we're talking about is the elasticity of labor demand, meaning how much does the demand for workers
Okay.
change when wages change?
Okay. So if wages go up significantly,
Right.
what happens if the demand for labor is very elastic?
Well, then employers might hire fewer workers
Okay.
because, it's classic economic principle. If something gets more expensive, people tend to buy less of it.
Right.
But on the other hand, if the demand for labor is inelastic, meaning it doesn't really change that much even if wages increase,
Okay.
then, raising wages might not have a big impact on employment levels.
Yeah, so it's a balance.
It's all about finding the right balance.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Unions and employers have to consider these factors
Absolutely.
to try to reach agreements that are good for everybody.
Right. It's not just as simple as demanding higher wages. You have to think about those consequences too.
Okay, this is fascinating. Let's move on to something that really surprised me in the source, and that is the economic theory of crime.
Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating one.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So this theory suggests that when people are deciding whether or not to commit a crime, they actually weigh the risks and benefits.
Really?
It's like a cost-benefit analysis.
So if someone thinks that they are more likely to get away with it and the benefits outweigh the risks,
Yeah.
then they're more likely to do it.
That's the general idea. Of course, human behavior is complex, but it provides a useful framework.
Right. So how does this apply to, lawyers in the real world?
Well, if a criminal defense lawyer understands this theory, they can use it to argue for more effective punishments or preventative measures, right?
Okay.
For example, they might argue that increasing the severity of the punishment could deter crime because it increases the perceived risk. Or they could advocate for social programs that address things like poverty, which could then reduce the perceived benefits of crime.
So it's not just about punishing people after the fact. It's more about trying to understand the economic incentives
Exactly.
that are causing people to commit crimes.
It's a much more nuanced approach.
And then come up with solutions that actually work.
Yep.
This is already so insightful. I'm learning so much. The source also covers tax law and policy.
Yes.
What can you tell me about that?
Well, this is where the concept of incentives really takes center stage. Governments use taxes to influence behavior. They give a couple of really interesting examples. They talk about how, a high consumption tax, like a sales tax,
Right.
could discourage people from spending too much.
Makes sense.
On the other hand, if you give tax incentives to certain industries like renewable energy, you can actually boost investment in those areas.
So if the government wants to encourage a specific behavior, like investing in green technology,
Yes.
they might offer tax breaks or something to make it more appealing, right?
Precisely.
And if they want to discourage something, like smoking, they could raise the taxes on cigarettes.
Exactly. It's all about using those economic levers to steer things in the right direction.
And that's relevant for anybody who pays taxes or is even interested in how the government is working, right?
Absolutely. Understanding how taxes work can help you be a better citizen and consumer. Make informed decisions.
Okay, let's shift gears to something totally different. Let's go to international law.
Okay.
Specifically, trade disputes between nations.
Right, right. The source mentions how important concepts like comparative advantage and tariffs are in these disputes.
Okay, so remind me what comparative advantage is.
So comparative advantage is this idea that, countries should really focus on producing goods and services
Okay.
where they have a lower opportunity cost.
Meaning that they can produce those things more efficiently than other countries.
Exactly. They're better suited for it. And then you have tariffs,
Right.
which are taxes on imported goods, often used to protect domestic industries. So, when you have two countries fighting over trade practices, lawyers who understand these economic concepts, they can build stronger cases by analyzing, the real economic effects of these practices.
So they could use these concepts to argue cases in front of the World Trade Organization.
Exactly. The WTO.
Which tries to make sure trade rules are fair and predictable.
Right, exactly.
Wow. It's amazing to see how all of these economic principles are popping up in so many different areas of law.
It's true.
It really emphasizes how important it is for anyone who works in the legal system to actually have a pretty good grasp of economics.
It's essential. And it's not just lawyers who benefit, it's really everyone.
Okay, so before we go into more detail about why this matters for our listeners, let's take a quick break,
Sounds good.
and we'll be right back to discuss how this knowledge can be applied to everyday life.
Okay, great.
So, what I really like about this deep dive is how it's highlighting these practical benefits of understanding economics,
Right.
even if you're not a lawyer or an economist.
It's true. This information is for everyone. It can really sharpen your critical thinking skills.
How so?
Well, economics encourages you to look beyond the surface,
Right.
to analyze the real impact of laws and policies.
So instead of just accepting a new law at face value, you can start asking questions like, who benefits from this? Who might be negatively impacted?
Right. What are those long-term effects? What are the trade-offs?
It helps you become a more engaged citizen,
Absolutely.
regardless of your profession.
It does. And on a more personal level, it can actually help you make better decisions in your own life.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Think about negotiating a salary or buying a car.
Okay, yeah.
Understanding things like supply and demand, opportunity cost, negotiation strategy.
So if you're looking for a new job, you can research the average salaries for similar positions in your area to get a sense of what your market value is.
Exactly.
And when you're buying a car, you know that thing's going to depreciate as soon as you drive it off the lot.
Right. You have to factor that in.
And think about, if I invest this money somewhere else,
Right. What's the opportunity cost?
what's the opportunity cost there?
Exactly.
This is making me realize how much economics is already a part of my life,
It's everywhere.
even if I don't realize it.
Once you start seeing the world through an economic lens, it just opens up a whole new level of understanding.
Like even news stories about tax reforms or interest rate changes become much more interesting.
Exactly. You're not just passively consuming information anymore. You're actively engaging with it.
You're not kidding. I used to tune those stories out.
I know, but now it's like, wait a minute. How is this going to affect me?
Right. How is this going to affect my life?
Exactly.
The Force walks us through a really fascinating case study that illustrates this. The cost of opportunity.
Yeah, a perfect example.
It shows how this simple concept
Right.
can guide these major legal decisions.
With real-world consequences.
Okay, so set the scene for me. What's the scenario?
Okay, imagine you're a lawyer advising a company, and they're facing a legal dispute,
Okay.
and they have to decide, do we pursue a lawsuit or do we settle out of court?
Okay.
This is where the cost of opportunity comes in.
So remind me again in this context, what is opportunity cost?
It's the value of the next best alternative that you're giving up
Right.
by choosing to do something else.
So in this case, the company has two choices. They can sue or they can settle.
Right.
And each one of those has different costs and benefits associated with it.
Precisely. So if they choose to sue, they're probably going to have to pay a lot of legal fees, spend a lot of time and resources on the lawsuit.
But there's a chance that they win.
Right. And they get a large financial award.
Right. It's a gamble.
It is a gamble. Now, if they settle out of court, they avoid those fees.
Right.
They resolve the dispute more quickly.
But they may not get as much money.
Right. That's the trade-off.
Right.
So the cost of opportunity here is the potential benefits they're giving up by choosing one option over the other.
Okay.
So if they sue, the opportunity cost is the time and money saved by settling. If they settle, the opportunity cost is that potential big payout.
Okay. So as a lawyer, how do you help your client navigate this?
Well, you have to really carefully weigh the potential costs and benefits of each option. Take into account their specific circumstances.
Right.
The risk tolerance.
Right.
You might analyze the strength of the case, the potential damages, the likelihood of success in court.
It's a big puzzle.
It is. It's about strategy.
It's a puzzle with lots of pieces, and you got to figure out how to put them all together.
And that's where understanding economics can make such a big difference.
Yeah, it really drives home the point that it's not just some theory.
Right.
Economics has real-world applications.
It's a practical tool that can be applied to these big legal decisions.
Yeah.
With real consequences for
Yeah.
people.
It also highlights why it's so important to have lawyers who understand it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They can use that knowledge to negotiate better deals,
Right.
develop better legal strategies.
And ultimately help their clients.
Exactly. Get those better outcomes.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of law and economics,
Yeah.
it's clear that economics is not just for economists.
It's for everybody.
It's a really powerful tool that anyone can use to understand the world a little bit better.
It's about seeing those hidden dynamics at play. The incentives, the trade-offs, the unintended consequences, and using that knowledge to make smarter decisions in all aspects of your life.
Whether it's negotiating a contract,
Right.
advocating for a policy change, or just understanding the news.
Exactly.
It's like you're getting a secret decoder ring for the legal system and the forces that are shaping society.
That's a great way to put it. And the more you understand those economic principles, the more empowered you become.
So for anyone listening who might still be on the fence about economics,
Right.
thinking like, ugh, economics, that's not for me.
Yeah.
I really urge you to reconsider.
I do too.
Because as this deep dive has shown, understanding even basic economic principles
Right.
can be a huge advantage in
Sure.
life, no matter what you do.
It's all about expanding your perspective, sharpening your thinking, and becoming a more informed citizen.
And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive.
We have.
We hope you found this exploration of law and economics insightful
Yeah.
and empowering.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive. So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from this whole deep dive?
I think it goes back to what we've been saying all along. Economics, it's for everyone.
Right.
It's a powerful tool. It helps us understand the world. It's not just for economists
It's not just for the experts.
or lawyers.
Right.
It's about seeing those hidden dynamics, the incentives at play,
Yeah.
the trade-offs, the unintended consequences.
Right. And using all of that knowledge that you gain to make better decisions in your own life.
Yes, absolutely. Whether you're negotiating a contract, advocating for some sort of change, or just trying to understand what you're seeing on the news.
It's been so eye-opening for me. I used to think economics was just so dry and irrelevant to my life. But now I see it's like woven into everything.
It's true. It is. And, like we talked about earlier, understanding even those basic economic principles can be really empowering.
Absolutely.
Take that example of the company deciding to sue or settle.
Right.
That idea of opportunity cost,
Yeah.
what you have to give up by choosing one path over another,
Right.
that's huge for any decision,
Yeah.
not just legal ones.
Right. It makes you think twice about choices you're making every day.
It does.
Like, do I work overtime to make some extra money, or do I spend time with my family?
Exactly.
There's an opportunity cost to both of those.
There is. And, when you start to see those hidden dynamics everywhere
Yeah.
in the world around you.
Right. Who benefits from this law? What are the downsides of this policy? You become a much more informed and engaged citizen.
You do. It's not just about money. It's about understanding how people behave what the consequences might be,
Mm-hmm.
and really making choices that align with what you care about.
Exactly.
So for everyone listening,
Mm-hmm.
here's a little something to think about.
Okay.
The next time you see a news story
Okay.
about a new law, a trade dispute,
Mm-hmm.
even just a change in interest rates,
Okay.
don't just keep scrolling.
Right.
Take a second
Mm-hmm.
and ask yourself, what are the economics here?
Yeah.
Who's winning? Who's losing?
It's a challenge
Yeah, it is.
to really look at the world through this new lens,
It is.
to see the economics in everything.
Right. But it's so rewarding.
Yeah.
And who knows, you might surprise yourself
Mm-hmm.
with how much you understand
Yeah.
and the impact you can have.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode.
Mhm.
We hope you enjoyed exploring how law and economics are shaping our world.
It's been fun.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.